Good evening, everyone. Merry Christmas. I hope all of you have had a wonderful day today, drinking plenty of eggnog and kissing the special someone underneath the mistletoe. Boy, do I have a story for all of you tonight. Have you ever had an encounter with a ghost? I know I have, and so have these men, so they say. But before I go on to the story, I just wanted to let you know, as far as the giveaway, unfortunately, there hasn't been anybody entering in, therefore there are no winners. So tonight is basically the story of the ghost of Jerry Bundler, and I hope you all will enjoy it. And I'm sorry for the delay. I had a lot of technical difficulties tonight, but this is a very good story. I thoroughly enjoyed it myself. Anyway, Merry Christmas to all of you. Y'all have a nice evening. Jerry Bundler by W. W. Jacobs. It wanted a few nights to Christmas, a festival for which the small town of Dorchester was making extensive preparations. The narrow streets, which had been thronged with people, were now almost deserted. The Cheap Jack from London, with the remnants of breath, left him after his evening's excursions, which making feeble attempts to blow out his naphtha lamp, and the last shops were rapidly closing for the night. In the comfortable coffee room of the Old Boar's Head, half a dozen guests, principally commercial travelers, sat talking by the light of the fire. The talk had drifted from the trade to politics, from politics to religion, and so by easy stages to the supernatural. 3 ghost stories, never known to fail before, had fallen flat. There was too much noise outside, too much light within. The 4th story was told by an old hand with more success. The streets were quiet, and he had turned the gas out. In the flickering light of the fire, as it shone on the glasses and danced with the shadows on the walls, the story proved so enthralling that George, the waiter, whose presence had been forgotten, created a very disagreeable sensation by suddenly starting up from a dark corner and gliding silently from the room. "That's what I call a good story," said one of the men, sipping his hot whiskey. Of course, it's not an old idea that spirits like to get into the company of human beings. A man once told me that he traveled down the Great Western with a ghost and hadn't the slightest suspicion of it until the inspector came for tickets. My friend said the way that ghost tried to keep up appearances by feeling for it in all its pockets and looking for the floor was quite touching. Ultimately, it gave up and within a faint groan vanished through the ventilator. "That'll do, Hirst," said another man. "It's not a subject for jest," said a little old gentleman who had been an attentive listener. "I've never seen an apparition myself, but I know people who have, and I consider that they form a very interesting link between us and the afterlife. There's a ghost story connected with this house, you know." "Never heard of it," said another speaker, "and I've been here some years now." "It dates back a long time ago now," said the old gentleman. "You've heard about Jerry Bundler, George?" "Well, I've just heard odds and ends, sir," said the old waiter, "but I'd never put much count into 'em. There was an old chapper what said he saw it, and the governor sacked on prompt. My father was a native to this town, and the old gentleman and knew the story well. He was a truthful man and a steady churchgoer, but I've heard him declare that once in his life he saw the appearance of Jerry Bundler in this house." "And who was this Bundler?" inquired a voice. "A London thief, pickpocket, highwayman, anything he could turn his dishonest hands to," replied the old gentleman. "And he was run to earth in this house one Christmas week some 80 years ago." He took the Last Supper in this very room, and after he had gone up to bed, a couple of Bow Street runners who had followed him from London but lost the scent a bit went upstairs to the landlord and tried the door. It was stout oak and fast. So one went to the yard and by means of a short ladder got onto the windowsill, which the old stayed outside the door. Those below in the yard saw the man crouching on the sill, and then there was a sudden smash of glass, and with a cry he fell in a heap on the stones at their feet. Then in the moonlight they saw the white face of the pickpocket peeping over the sill, and while some stayed in the yard, others ran into the house and helped the other man to break the door in. It was difficult to obtain entrance even then, for it was barred with heavy furniture. But they got in at last, and the first thing that met their eyes was the body of Jerry dangling from the top of the bed by his own handkerchief. "Which bedroom was it?" asked 2 or 3 voices together. The narrator shook his head. "That I can't tell you. But the story goes that Jerry still haunts this house, and my father used to declare positively that the last time he slept here, the ghost of Jerry Bundler lowered itself from the top of his bed and tried to strangle him." "That'll do," said an uneasy voice. "I wish you'd thought to ask your father which bedroom it was." "What for?" inquired the old gentleman. "Well, I should take care not to sleep in it. That's all," said the voice shortly. "There's nothing to fear," said the other. "I don't believe for a moment that ghosts could really hurt one. In fact, my father used to confess that it was only an unpleasantness of the thing that upset him, that for all practical purposes, Jerry's fingers might have been made of cotton wool for all the harm they could do." "That's all very fine," said the last speaker again. "A ghost story is a ghost story, sir. But when a gentleman tells a tale of a ghost in the house in which one is going to sleep, I call it more ungentlemanly." "Pooh! Nonsense," said the old man, rising. "Ghosts can't hurt you. For my own part, I should rather like to see one. Good night, gentlemen." "Good night," said the others. "And I only hope Jerry'll pay you a visit," added the nervous man as the door closed. "Bring some more whiskey, George," said a stout commercial. "I want to keep up when the talk turns this way." "Shall I light the gas, Mr. Malcolm?" said George. "No, the fire's very comfortable," said the traveler. "Now, gentlemen, any of you know any more?" "I think we've had enough," said the other man. "We shall be thinking we see spirits next, and we're not all like the old gentleman who's just gone." "Old humbug," said Hurst. "I should like to put him to the test. Suppose I dress up like Jerry Bundler and go and give him a chance of displaying his courage." "Bravo," said Malcolm huskily, drowning 1 or 2 faint no's. "Just for the joke, gentlemen." No, drop it, Hurst," said another man. "Only for the joke," said Hurst, somewhat eagerly. "I've got some things upstairs in which I am going to play the rivals in knee breeches, buckles, and all that sort of thing. It's a rare chance. If you'll wait a bit, I'll give you a full dress rehearsal enthralled Jerry Bundler or the Nocturnal Strangler." "You won't frighten us," said the commercial with a husky laugh. "I don't know that," said Hurst sharply. "It's a question of acting, that's all. I'm pretty good at, ain't I, Somers?" "Oh, you're all right for an amateur," said his friend with a laugh. "I'll bet a level sov you don't frighten me," said a stout traveler. "Done," said Hurst. "I'll take the bet to frighten you first, and the old gentleman afterwards. These gentlemen men shall be the judges. You won't frighten us, sir, said another man, because we're prepared for you. But you'd better leave the old man alone. It's dangerous play. Well, I'll try you first, said Hearst, springing up. No gas, mind. He ran lightly upstairs to his room, leaving the others, most of whom had been drinking somewhat freely, to wrangle about his proceedings. It ended in two of them going to bed. He's crazy on acting, said Somers, lighting his pipe. Thinks he's the equal of anybody almost. It doesn't matter with us, but I won't let him go to the old man, and he won't mind so long as he gets an opportunity of acting to us. Well, I hope he'll hurry up, said Malcolm, yawning. It's nearly 12 now. Nearly half an hour past. Malcolm drew his watch from his pocket and was busy winding it when George, the waiter, had been sent on an errand to the bar, burst suddenly into the room and rushed towards them. "He's coming, gentlemen," he said breathlessly. "Why, you're frightened, George," said the stout commercial with a chuckle. "It was the suddenness of it," said George sheepishly, "and besides, I didn't look for seeing him in the bar. There's only a glimmer of light there, and he was sitting there on the floor behind the bar. I nearly trod on him." "Oh, you'll never make a man, George," said Malcolm. "Well, it took me unawares," said the waiter. "Not that I'd have gone to the bar by myself if I'd known it was there, and I don't believe you would either, sir." "Nonsense," said Malcolm. "I'll go and fetch him in." "You don't know what it's like, sir," said George, catching him by the sleeve. "It ain't fit to look at by yourself. It ain't indeed. It's got the... What's that?" They all started at the sound of a smothered cry from the staircase and the sound of somebody running hurriedly along the passage. Before anybody could speak, the door flew open, and a figure burst into the room, flung itself gasping and shivering upon them. "What's that? What is the matter?" demanded Malcolm. "Why, it's Mr. Hearst." He shook him roughly and then held some spirit to his lips. Hearst drank it greedily, and with a sharp intake of his breath gripped him by the arm. "Light the gas, George," said Malcolm. The waiter obeyed hastily. Hearst's ludicrous but pitiable figure, in knee breeches and coat, a large wig all array, and his face a mess of grease paint, clung to him, trembling. "Now what's the matter?" asked Malcolm. "I've seen it," said Hearst, with a hysterical sob. "Oh, Lord, I'll never play the fool again. Never." "Seen what?" said the others. "Him. The ghost. Anything," said Hearst wildly. "Rot," said Malcolm uneasily. "I was coming down the stairs," said Hearst, "just capering down, as I thought it ought to do. I felt a tap." He broke off suddenly and peered nervously through the open door into the passage. "I thought I saw it again," he whispered. "Look at the front of the stairs. Can you see anything?" "No, there's nothing there," said Malcolm, whose own voice shook a little. "Go on. You felt a tap on your shoulder." "I turned around and saw it. A little wicked head and a white dead face." "Pah, that's what I saw in the bar," said George. "Horrid it was. Devilish." Hearst shuddered, and, still remaining his nervous grip of Malcolm's sleeve, dropped into a chair. "Well, it's a almost unaccountable thing," said the dumbfounded Malcolm, turning to the others. "It's the last time I come to this house. I'll leave tomorrow," said George. "I wouldn't go down that bar again by myself. No, not for £50. It's talking about the things that caused it, I expect," said one of the men. "We've all been talking about this and having it in our minds. Practically, we've been forming a spiritualistic circle without knowing it." "Hang the old man," said Malcolm. heartedly. "Upon my soul, I'm half afraid to go to bed. It's odd they should both think they saw something." "I saw it as plain as I see you, sir," said George solemnly. "Perhaps if you keep your eyes turned up the passage, you'll see it for yourself." They followed the direction of his finger, but saw nothing, although one of them fancied that a head peered around the corner of the wall. "Who'll come down to the bar?" said Malcolm, looking round. "You can go if you like," said one of the others, with a faint laugh. "We'll wait here for you." The stout traveler walked towards the door and took a few steps up the passage. Then he stopped. All was quite silent, and he walked slowly to the end and looked down fearfully towards the glass partition which shut off the bar. 3 times he made as though to go to it. Then he turned back and glanced over his shoulder, came hurriedly back to the room. "Did you see it, sir?" whispered George. "Don't know," said Malcolm softly. "I fancy I saw something, but it might have been fancy. I'm in the mood to see anything just now. How are you feeling now, sir?" "Oh, I feel a bit better now," said Hurst, somewhat brusquely, as all eyes were turned upon him. "I dare say you think I'm easily scared, but you didn't see it." "Not at all," said Malcolm, smiling faintly despite himself. "I'm going to bed," said Hurst, noticing the smile and resenting it. "Will you share my room with me, Somers?" "I will, with pleasure," said his friend, "provided you don't mind sleeping with the gas on full all night." He rose from his seat and, bidding the company a friendly good night, left the room with his crestfallen friend. The others saw them to the foot of the stairs, and having heard their door closed, returned to the coffee room. "Well, I suppose that the bet's off," said the stout commercial, poking the fire and then standing with his legs apart on the hearthrug. "Though as far as I can see, I won it. I never saw a man so scared in all my life. Sort of poetic justice about it, isn't there?" "Never mind about poetry or justice," said one of the listeners. "Who is going to sleep with me?" "I will," said Malcolm affably. "And I suppose we share a room together, Mr. Leake?" said the third man, turning to the fourth. "No, thank you," said the other briskly. "I don't believe in ghosts. If anything comes into my room, I shall shoot it." "That won't hurt a spirit, Leak," said Malcolm decisively. "Well, the noise'll be like company to me," said Leak, "and it'll wake the house too. But if you're nervous, sir," he added with a grin, to the man who had suggested sharing his room, "George'll be only too pleased to sleep on the doormat inside your room, I know." "That I will, sir," said George fervently. "And if you gentlemen would only come down with me to the bar to put the gas out, I could never be sufficiently grateful." They went out in a body, with the exception of Leak, peering carefully before them as they went. George turned the light out in the bar, and they returned unmolested to the coffee room, and avoiding the sardonic smile of Leak, prepared to separate for the night. "Give me the candle while you put the gas out, George," said the traveler. The waiter handed it to him and extinguished the gas, and at the same moment all distinctly heard a step in the passage outside. It stopped at the door, and as they watched with a bated breath, the door creaked and slowly opened. Malcolm fell back, open-mouthed, as a white, leering face with the sunken eyeballs and close-cropped bullet head appeared at the opening. For a few seconds the creature stood regarding them, blinking in a strange fashion at the candle. Then, with a sliding movement, it came a little way into the room and stood there as if bewildered. Not a man spoke or moved, but all watched with a horrible fascination as the creature removed its dirty neckcloth and its head rolled on its shoulder. For a minute it paused, and then, holding the rag before it, moved toward Malcolm. The candle went out suddenly with a flash and a bang. There was a smell of powder and something writhing in the darkness of the floor. A faint, choking cough, and then silence. Malcolm was the first to speak. "Matches," he said in a strange voice. George struck one. Then he leaped at the gas, and a burner flamed from the match. Malcolm touched the thing on the floor with his foot and found it soft. He looked at his companions. They mouthed inquiries at him, but he shook his head. He lit the candle and kneeled down, examined the silent thing on the floor. Then he rose swiftly and, dipping his handkerchief in the water jug, bent down again and grimly wiped the white face. Then he sprang back with a cry of incredulous horror, pointing at it. Leek's pistol fell to the floor, and he shut out the sight with his hands. But the others, crowding forward, gazed spellbound at the dead face of Hirst. Before a word was spoken, the door opened, and Somers hastily entered the room. His eyes fell on the floor. "Good God," he cried. "You didn't." Nobody spoke. "I told him not to," he said in a suffocating voice. "I told him not to. I told him." He leaned against the wall, deathly sick, put his arm out feebly, and fell fainting into the traveler's arms. Well, that's it for tonight's story. I hope you all enjoyed it. And I hope y'all enjoyed the Holiday Nights of Terror series. If you enjoyed it, please comment down below so I'll know if I do this again next year. Be sure to stay tuned for New Year's Eve. I have another live stream coming up. It's called the New Year's Eve Masquerade live stream, and I will be hosting 2 creepypastas that were created by not so well-known writers, but they're very good writers, and I would love to introduce them to you when the time comes. Y'all have a wonderful night. Good night. Sleep tight, and don't let the shadows bite.